from Temple, many years working as an archaeologist, an MA in museum studies from UArts, and our paths first crossed, I guess, in 2009 when you came to the
Correct.
Chestnut Hill, then Historical Society, now the Chestnut Hill Conservancy. And many of you will know that FOW's home for many years was the second floor of the Chestnut Hill Conservancy. So Alex is a great friend of the organization. I'm thrilled to have him here tonight, and I'm going to let him talk in a minute. But first, I have word I'm supposed to say. We're not going anywhere, Claire. Okay. How many of you are members of FOW? Thank you so much. And how many of you also volunteer? I know we have some great volunteers here. Thank you so much. If you are not someone who raised your hand, I think everyone did. I don't have my glasses on, so I wasn't able to see the people who didn't. I would encourage you to check out our website and consider becoming a member or joining us in volunteering or passing it on to a friend to get involved as well. As I mentioned, we've been here for a while. We have 3,000 members, and everything we do is in partnership and with Philadelphia Parks and Recreation. And we do so much from physical work in the project. Some of you might have been slightly inconvenienced tonight by the road closure on Valley Green Road. You're going to love it. It's going to be beautiful. A brand new feature for the Wissahickon, a pedestrian bridge. It's going to give you a wonderful experience walking above Little Valley Green Run, where you will see the spectacular restoration of the run. So I appreciate everyone's patience with that. That is an over $3 million investment that we're putting in there. A combination of both public grants through the state and the city, as well as many, many individual contributors of all sizes, hundreds of $1,000 gifts to $100 gift, and it has all made a difference. So we do really big capital projects. We do medium level projects with staff and volunteers, trail restoration, stewardship of historic properties like Valley Green Inn. And we do a lot of programming, and this is one of our programs, our Valley Talk. So all of that is made possible at the very core by our members. And so again, a pitch, join us. And let's continue to be great friends. And I am so excited now to turn this over to Alex, who's been a great friend of the Wissahickon. And I know you're going to be very excited that you joined us tonight for this. Here we go.
Thank you very much, Roxanne. And thank all of you for coming. Actually, almost to the day. This is my 15th anniversary at the Chestnut Hill Conservancy. And but I grew up in the area, and by the time I was about 10, was in the Wissahickon Valley more often than out of it. And so if you were around in the 80s and 90s, you might have seen a little grubby kid running around. Well, that was me. So tonight I'm going to use historical photographs from the collections of the Chestnut Hill Conservancy's Wissahickon collection to illustrate, as I call it here, a soup to nuts history of the Wissahickon Valley. As you can imagine, the history is very lengthy, so I cannot get into everything. But what I will be discussing are the beginnings of the human occupation of the valley with the Lenni Lenape, and then talking about the mills of the Wissahickon and farms. We don't talk a lot about farms around here. We always think about, you know, the mills along the creek itself and its tributaries, but there are also lots of farms in the area. The Wissahickon Turnpike and its origins, and also the origins of the name. Most of you, but not all of you, probably realize this, of Forbidden Drive. You probably know it already, but just to be sure. Then the inns and hotels that started along the Wissahickon Turnpike, and then the city park, as I've just sort of loosely calling it, sort of around the time of the Centennial Exposition and afterwards in the Victorian era. Then moving into the 20th century and the arrival of the FOW and the Great Depression, and then this weird period of calm or period of stasis, as I've called it, after, excuse me, World War II, and then kind of through to the 70s. And then finally, the relationship between the Friends of the Wissahickon, the Chestnut Hill Conservancy, and park stewardship. So the Lenni Lenape, there are very few traces of them left, but there are a few that are in sort of in honor of them. One is you're probably aware of the statue of Chief Teddy Uskung at the base of Rex Avenue. The one that's there now, a stone statue, was built, completed in 1902. It was by a sculptor named John Massey Rind, and it was donated to the park by the Henry family, Charles W. Henry in particular, who was related to the Houstons and Woodwards, who developed Chestnut Hill, starting in the mid-1880s and really have a presence to the present day. But what you're looking at is, I don't know if you're aware, there was an earlier statue, if you will, of Chief Teddy Uskung. It was wood. And this photograph was taken around 1900. It was a wooden cutout. By the turn of the 20th century, it had largely fallen apart. It was installed in 1856 by a gentleman by the name of Joseph Middleton, who actually lived on the campus of what is now Chestnut Hill College. And he had a very big role in the creation of the Wissahickon Turnpike, which I'll discuss in a few minutes. So one thing that I really don't know is the history of a lot of the trails around here. So I've always heard it said, and as someone who grew up in the area, that parts of Germantown Avenue, and also, by the way, parts of Ridge Avenue actually originated as Lenni Lenape trails that were later combined and used by white European settlers. However, that what you're looking at here is a computer generated, this is online, by the way, of the area around, see if I actually do this correctly, the Thomas Mill Covered Bridge right in the center. So this is Thomas Mill Road. I apologize, since I started walking around in the Wissahickon and roaming and all of that a long time ago. I do not know the trail colors. So I won't be able to say, oh yeah, that's on the white trail or the orange trail, but I will do my best to make it clear as to the location to which I'm referring. So, and then Bells Mills Road up here at the top, heading to Ridge Avenue off out of view to the left. So this is the area, this is Thomas Mill Road and its orientation in 1777. And if that's already present then, and Bells Mills Road is already present then, who is to say that sections of these roads, and by the way, at least in the case of Thomas Mill, I believe this is now partially, at least up here, the Yellow Trail. Who's to say that those actually don't date back to the Lenape? So I think when we're walking the trails, we really should keep that in mind, that we are walking on hundreds, if not thousands of years of history. So in 1690, we have the arrival of the first mill in Philadelphia, for that matter, and also, of course, in the Wissahickon Valley, with the construction of the first mill at Rittenhouse by William Rittenhouse, who is from Germany. This is a view of Rittenhouse, we call it now historic Rittenhouse, but as it appeared around 1905. So in the front, you will see, it's called the McKinney Quarry, and schist was mined from that quarry from about 1835 to 1910 for many of the area's houses. It's still certainly back there, and you can still see the cliff face back there. Then in the sort of middle foreground is what now is Lincoln Drive. And then the Monashone Creek or Paper Mill Run down here. The homestead of Rittenhouse would be back here. And then, by the way, this is Bluebell Hill. And one thing I don't think people realize is how open this area once was. People think that it was, oh, when he first visited this area, he said in summer, you can't see 10 feet ahead of you. You know how dark some areas of the park are, but it wasn't always the case. And this is a good illustration of that. So these mills produce textiles, of course, obviously paper, in the case of the Rittenhouse paper mill, grist, there were sawmills as well. And these lasted through, many of them through the mid-19th century. And then what happened was the city of Philadelphia in 1868 started to purchase land along Wissahickon Creek and its tributaries to protect the city's water supply. So that the intake there was at the Fairmount Park Waterworks. So they started raising the mills and letting them fall into various states of decay. This is along Gresham Creek around 1905. These are the Hill mills here. You see in the distance, you see that's the McCown Street Bridge. So that was, excuse me, that was built in 1895. So right then and there, we already know that this photo dates to after that, but I don't think by a lot. So these mills slowly slipped into ruin. Today, there are jumbles of rock here, little traces of wall. This retaining wall here along the creek is partially still standing. But as the decades pass, these are certainly disappearing, what's left of them. So this is the Kitchens Mill complex. Kitchens Lane in the middle distance with the covered bridge. And yes, there are quite a number of covered bridges over the Wissahickon in the 19th century, not just the Thomas Mill covered bridge, but across the Wissahickon Creek here. This is actually the first of a couple mills here, and then houses for the mill workers. This is by the way, you walk right by this almost exact location if you are on the Orange Trail. The monastery would be visible if this photograph continued to the upper left. And so along with those mills, when they were abandoned, the houses also slipped into decay. So we were given the photo on the left. This is one of those now and then photos of workers' houses along what would later become Lincoln Drive around 1870. And unfortunately, you can barely see it here. It doesn't show up too well. At first I thought I had no idea where this was. And then one thing clued me in is this. You see this little circle? That's the culvert that takes Paper Mill Run or the Monashone under the area of Forbidden Drive at 10 Box. So all of a sudden, this whole thing made sense. And this is a recent shot, just grabbed it off of Google Street Views. And the house is approximately where that car now stands. There's a little bit of a stone wall there, but that's really about it. So some of these ruins, there really are barely even ruins anymore, but flats, and if you're not paying attention, you'll never notice them. So I had mentioned earlier about farms, and they, of course, exist on both sides of the Wissahickon Valley. Those on the Chestnut Hill and Mount Airy sides were largely developed by the turn of the 20th century. But those on the Roxborough and Andorra sides lasted really well into the 20th century. So you're looking here at houses along Gorgas Lane, and you'll see corn here and planting going on here. This is 1913 near Henry Avenue. So what happened was the north side of Wissahickon Creek and Chestnut Hill, Mount Airy were largely developed by the turn of the 20th century, but weren't really developed in Roxborough and Andorra until the arrival of Henry Avenue. There's a little section of Henry Avenue kind of in the area where it's very straight near Saul Agricultural School. That goes back to before the Revolutionary War, and it's been integrated into present day Henry Avenue. But by and large, Henry Avenue actually dates from the mid 1950s. Yes, construction started after the end of World War II. And so a lot of farms survived on the Roxborough and Andor side until really well after World War II. So we arrive at the Wissahickon Turnpike, and the seeds of it were started really in 1826, when if you are taking what is now Lincoln Drive and you're crossing, heading up Lincoln Drive into Germantown, Mount Airy, and Chestnut Hill, you cross under the railroad tracks, the bridge of the SEPTA's Norristown line, and you go around the curve. There was a large outcrop there that was dynamited in 1826 to allow horse traffic to access the creek north of that. So in 1851, I had mentioned Joseph Middleton earlier, the gentleman who lived on the site of what is now Chestnut Hill College. He started an impetus to run a turnpike up from what is now Lincoln Drive all the way up through the county line, Northwestern Avenue. And I hadn't really thought about this. If his house was by at the site of what is now Chestnut Hill College, this actually is a straight shot to his house. So, that's called a twofer. If the public benefits and I benefit, then, so much the greater. So construction started in 1851 and continued to 1856. And it's funny, I think we kind of always think of this later, now, of course, called Forbidden Drive, as sort of always having been there, but it's actually really one of the newer roads in the Wissahickon. The crossroads, like Bell's Mills Road, as an example, really are much earlier. So along the Wissahickon Turnpike sprung a whole bunch of hotels. And this is one of my favorite shots of the Wissahickon. This is technically it's the second Indian Rock Hotel, which was built in around 1880. The first was at the base of Rex Avenue, but this is the second as it appeared in 1895. This was actually at the base of Monastery Avenue. And I just love the detail. Unfortunately, the screen, just the projection on the screen loses some of the detail, but the signs are all legible. And it's really an amazing shot. But this is just one of many that once stood along what we now know as Forbidden Drive. I would be remiss if I didn't talk about Valley Green. We are right here, right now. This is, as it appeared, the Valley Green Hotel around 1860. And it was built in 1851. So, of course, the Wissahickon Turnpike was in the process of being constructed. It was built by Edward Rinker, its first proprietor. And I don't really know why, but it went into decay fairly quickly. There are some later photos of in the collection, not from 1910, but I'm thinking from 1880 or 90. They're not very good, but they show the inn in an advanced state of decay with stucco falling off of the side. So what happened was in 1901, the colonial dames did some fundraising efforts to restore the inn. The city was actually going to demolish it. So this is the result, Valley Green Inn, as it appeared in 1910. So I don't know if the rumor still exists. I'm hoping it really doesn't. But there's always a story, oh, well, George Washington slept here during the Revolutionary War. No. But well, why did that even get started? And one thing I could think of, and I have no idea if there's any truth to this, is if the colonial dame started that as a rumor, it would probably be easier to fundraise for this. So I don't know, but it's just a thought. So I love this photo. It's gorgeous. It really captures the essence of what Valley Green is, the feel of it. And if you really look, this is 1910, not a whole lot has changed between then and now, 114 years later. There are the warming sheds still standing today that seem to constantly need repair. So then the Centennial Exposition arrived in 1876. And I don't know if any of you have seen these guides, these very elaborately illustrated guides for the Centennial, advertising all the inns and everywhere to stay and everything to take a look at while you're in Philadelphia. And there are hundreds, if not close to 1,000 pages, of some of them anyway. And Fairmount Park and the Wissahickon Valley were very prominently featured in a number of them. So I think that really got the Wissahickon Valley on the map, if you will, as a place to visit, to hike. Also a romantic spot. Romanticism was very much in during that time. And the other thing is, you also have the mills that are now slipping into a ruin, into a state of ruin. So those also would have been attractive, especially as the the end of the century drew near. There are plenty of photos I've seen with couples posing, newlyweds at one of the various ruins. So to this, this is Devil's Pool, and I don't know if you're aware that this is around 1890, that Devil's Pool had a very elaborate system of wooden walkways, and it's faintly visible here, a gazebo. And these were built around 1885, and I think that is a symbol or a sign of the arrival of the modern park. Just another view of Devil's Pool from a postcard around 1905. So here's the gravity sewer that takes our effluvium, if you will, from Northwest Philadelphia to the what is now the Philadelphia International Airport adjacent to it. This went in 1891. I don't know what people's attitudes were at the time. Was this seen as, hideous or intrusive? I don't really know, but I think today it's seen as actually very much a part of this landscape. So along with hiking and everything else, with the arrival of the bicycle towards the end of the 19th century, there is someone standing with his bicycle. This is actually, you see a road down here. This is leading down into the Chestnut Valley, right near where where the McCown Street Bridge now stands, and this is still very much there. So the city park really started to be, the Wissahickon Valley really started to be embraced by at least locals, if not those coming from regionally, as a place of recreation. I just love this scene. And it's in some ways almost hard to envision this is where it is today. This is Lake Surprise, or are you surprised by this Lake Surprise? This was used to be located along Chestnut Valley Drive, which is in the background. This is as it appeared in 1912. So Chestnut Creek runs right along there. And this dam was actually a dam for something called Carr's Mill, which stood just a little ways downstream. And you can see it's actually been taken care of, and it looks like it's been recently mortared. So the problem that started to happen is that you had a lot of wear and tear on the park. You know how it is when something is popular like this, it starts to get overrun with people. So around 1915, the city of Philadelphia, and in particular the Fairmount Park Commission, thought, maybe we should open what was the old Wissahickon Turnpike to automobiles. And so you had various equestrian groups, as you see here. This is, by the way, not from the first parade, but one from 1949. you had all these people, park users getting together in protest in 1921. And from that, the first Wissahickon Day parade was held. Unfortunately, it was kind of sad because I was really hoping it would happen. That 100th anniversary fell during the COVID-19 pandemic, and the 100th parade did not happen. So at that same time, this nifty little organization called the Friends of the Wissahickon arrived on the scene in 1924. And I think it's important that it arrived when it did. It's significant. And so you have an increased awareness of the fragility of the park as a result of the arrival of the automobile, or the proposed arrival of the automobile. And by the way, I did just realize I didn't mention that as a result of the protection of what was the old Wissahickon Turnpike, it was called Forbidden Drive, or forbidden to automobiles. But anyway, the Friends of the Wissahickon came in a period of relative prosperity. It was the 1920s, but again, there was a heightened awareness of the threatened nature of the park's resources. And the FOW was also, I would say, very critical in helping to provide work for the unemployed and underemployed during the Great Depression. This is actually totally unrecognizable. This is from one of the local papers. But the scene is actually of the creation of the eastern portion of Crescent Valley Drive, and in 1932. And so the view is from standing kind of Germantown Avenue and looking east towards the Chestnut Hill East Line and Staten Avenue, with the creek being somewhere off over here. So the Wissahickon, the Friends of the Wissahickon provided a lot of help, a lot of financial help with various park projects. Actually, before I leave that slide, the first meeting of the Friends was held at Drew Moore, the main house of the estate of Henry Howard Houston, and about 50 people attended. And its first president was a gentleman by the name of Charles F. Jenkins. His house was at High Hollow, which is at the base of Kitchens Lane. So here's another project, installing a walkway north of Bells Mills Road, about 1938. So this is one of those, aha, now I understand what this is. So growing up, walking along the creek, if you left the parking lot at Bells Mills Road and headed up the creek towards Germantown Avenue and Chestnut Hill College, in the muck, I don't know about now, but it would show up on and off for years. I would see this, a line of almost like cobblestones, and never really knew what it was until I saw this. So this was another project that the FOW was involved with over the course of the Great Depression. And of course, we have the Works Progress Administration shelters up and down Forbidden Drive. This is one at Bells Mills Road as it appeared in 1940. And of course, the threats still continued. This in one of the local papers, this was published. It was called The Great Hot Dog War of 1937. And what happened was the cities got the idea of putting concession stands up and down Forbidden Drive and at various other locations of the park. And of course, that same group, or at least similar group of people, got together and said, you know, no way. So that's one of those things that fortunately did not happen. And then we reached into this period of calm. By the way, did you hear that chattering when I put this slide up? This is a bunch of you reacted to this. This is just a stunning image of the area of the creek around Valley Green in 1939. And I don't know if you read the Wissahickon Wednesday posts that we and the at the Chestnut Conservancy and the Friends of the Wissahickon do, but this is I'm the one who writes those, and this one actually went viral, and I think it did for a reason. It's very sort of emblematic of the peace and tranquility and fun that you can have in the Wissahickon Valley, but it also illustrates this calm that I think started around the end of World War II. And I don't want to say nothing happened, and maybe stasis isn't quite the right word, but if nothing happens, then what happens is, in terms of like maintenance, the park slowly starts to slide into a period of decline. We have some at the Chestnut Conservancy board meeting minutes of the Friends of the Wissahickon from sort of the 1940s, 50s, 60s, but not a lot. And of those, they don't really suggest that a whole lot was really going on. So this was lost. This is Buttercup Cottage. I'm being a little unfair. This is taken around 1905. It was demolished in 1958. And I'm saying I'm being a little unfair because this wasn't yet a part of the park. This was actually built as early as 1812. It stood at the base of Cresham Road, and I'll show you a more recent photo of the area to establish that. And it was the summer home for working girls. It was opened by Henry Howard Houston around 1885 or so, and lasted through about 1920 or 25. And then it just sat and sat and sat and slowly deteriorated. The city bought it, and it was demolished in 1958. And this is the only thing that's left of that is the barn. And so associated with Buttercup Cottage. Buttercup Cottage used to be right in here. And this is Cresham Valley Drive, Cresham Road, heading up to Allen's Lane off to the right. And so this barn was all that remained. And I remember the remains of it, still smoking in the early 80s. Girl Scouts would put on productions there. And you'd occasionally be able to see through these huge barn doors, and you'd see through, and there'd be beer bottles and that kind of thing. So, kids were breaking into it, and eventually it burned down. So this is all that remains of Buttercup Cottage. And what's not technically the college, but cottage itself, but of any of the buildings standing there. And this is Devil's Pool. Around it was in 1960, from a slide we were given by the estate actually of Sue Baldwin. I don't know if any of you knew her, but this is also slowly slipping away. And the wooden walkways that were built during the Victorian era, they were dismantled and taken away in I believe 1978. So I think the year around 1970 is important in the history of the Wissahickon Valley. You have, of course, had Earth Day, the first Earth Day, and you had really the environmental movement taking off. And the FOW also took off. They were doing many more activities, and this is according to the newsletters and the board meeting minutes that we have from that era. They were being involved in many more projects and spearheading them. This actually, they were very much involved with. It's under construction right now. So what happened was the parking lot right outside here at Valley Green was becoming overrun with cars, and there needed to be a sort of a safety valve to take some of the cars away. So the upper parking lot was open in 1985, and you see there's a trail user using the new ped path that connects down to the Valley Green Road Bridge. And I mentioned Sue Baldwin earlier. Programming really took off in the 70s and 80s. She was at the Andorra Natural Area, now part of the Wissahickon Environmental Center. This is one of her big things. Was her maple sugaring demonstrations. This is in 93. And then we have someone by the name of Dave Bauer, who is with us this evening. Here he is with Temple Volunteers in 1998. Off to the right, he was the head of the Conservation Committee of the FOW for many years and was constantly leading volunteers into the Wissahickon Valley to clean up the park on a regular basis. And yeah, I kind of figured, but I didn't want to assume. Thank you, David. And FOW volunteers that I mentioned earlier at 10 box around 2000. So one thing that happened that brought the relationship of the FOW and the Chestnut Hill Conservancy much closer was the establishment of our easement or joint easement program in 1990. So what you're looking at here, one in a series of several photos of properties that are protected from development by easements. So this is in the Wissahickon watershed in Mount Airy. And one thing I don't think people are really that they necessarily realize, the park's actually smaller than it appears, because you have all these private properties bordering the park and sort of fingering into the park. So often when you're, especially along the edges of the park, you might think, oh, well, those woods are, part of the park. Well, they're potentially someone's backyard. And so those could be potentially lost, and with increased erosion and sedimentation and everything that goes along with development without these easements. So just a few slides showing protected areas in the Wissahickon watershed in Mount Airy. And another one. And then that is what I have. So that's my contact information. I have business cards. Feel free to reach out to me if you have follow-up information, questions, anything of that nature. I'd absolutely love to hear from you. And so now we'll open it up to questions. But before we do that, we should all give a round of applause to the FOW. Congratulations on your 100th anniversary.
Thank you. All right, folks, if you've been with us before, I'm gonna try not to hit Alex like I did my employee before. Apologies. If you've been with us before, you know the drill. We're gonna take some questions from the room. You're gonna say your question, then I'm gonna repeat it so our friends on Zoom can hear it. And then once we've done a few of those, we'll check and see. I'm gonna be checking my phone. I'm not scrolling mindlessly. That's how I find out the questions from the Zoom folks. So I'll be checking that in a minute. And thank you so much, Alex. That was great. I also, just before we get into questions, want to give a plug for Night of Lights. Obviously, you all are history lovers, and this is a great event that the Chestnut Hill Conservancy is putting together starting October 3rd and going through the 9th in Chestnut Hill. Some wonderful light shows on buildings and a lot of history content. And I'm sure more information is available on their website, but there's a flyer over there. So I want to put that plug in.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And thank you for that great history of the upper parking lot. I really like that, 1985. So, all right, with that, why don't we have any questions? Carolyn?
Oh, did I gloss over that?
Where did the word Wissahickon come from, Alex?
And it's of course a corruption from either yellow colored stream or Catfish Creek.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Also, it was an excellent presentation.
Oh, thank you.
Skating photograph from 1939. In your Wissahickon boyhood, when winters were colder, did you observe skating activity?
Yes. And I even what?
I have to repeat the question.
Oh, yes.
The question is, did Alex ever ice skate in the Wissahickon?
So I tried, and only because look at me, and even when I was young, I was pretty clumsy, but it would freeze over with some frequency. I remember in the late 70s, it seemed to regularly. And what my father would do, he would take a railroad spike. We had plenty of them since we had the Chestnut West line in our backyard. And he would hammer that into the ice to test it. So I didn't really necessarily skate all that much. That was just useless. but I certainly would walk on the, ice a lot. I don't know if I really should, but yes.
I skated, I tried to skate, there was a set of stairs right down Valley Green that went down to the creek.
Mhm.
It was a cold winter, I guess, early eighties, late seventies. I went down and I skated for about 3 minutes and a cop pulled up and said, no.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're just sharing memories of
Right.
ice skating.
And what's said here stays here. We won't, right.
So we have a early 80s recollection of ice skating, but that being cut short by the police. Yes.
I've been struck by the deep definition raising of all of the mills to the point where there is like almost no trace. You have to really know where they were and see if you can find a little bit of the foundation. Is that a policy of the city to just do away with every trace of these mills? Because if it's not the case in other places close by, or in Gladwin, there are still ruins remaining.
So the question in the room is, what happened to all the mills? And was that a public policy decision or some other incident, Alex?
So one thing that I've heard is that in some cases, so I had discussed the WPA and of course the shelter building and all the projects. I've heard it said that one of the projects they had, I didn't really want to go into, not that I mind, but because I'm not 100% sure of it, was that part of it was ruin clearing. And so I did archaeology for 20 years. And what I think may have also happened is if you think about areas adjacent to the Wissahickon Valley, and especially on the Mount Airy side, they were being developed in the early 20th century. Well, wait a minute, there are all these ruins we can actually get rock from, as opposed to, mining new. So I know it has been done historically at farmsteads. You would reclaim the rock and then use it elsewhere. So yeah, the clue now is, and I've been around Gladwin, so I know exactly what you're talking about. All those ruins are just sitting there. There in the Wissahickon, there are these little breaks where the land will be slopey, and then it'll just feet sometimes it'll break, it'll flatten out, and it'll drop again. And sometimes that's the site of a structure. I'll actually tell you, for those of you who want to suffer at the end of this and walk up Valley Green Road, right across from the upper parking lot, there is one of those flats. And there was a hotel there called the Viola Hotel, as another example. And so the clue often now isn't the rocks, it's like almost like a crater or a depression with a flat in the bottom of it.
Yes.
I have a question for Ruffian, if that's okay.
Hey.
Is there any plan by FOW to mark those sites to interpret where those mills were?
So the question is FOW planning to mark where the sites where the mills were? Everything is possible in the virtual world. So I think story mapping is something that we're really interested in, and we could talk about that moving forward. Some of the mills and those old mill sites, if you're familiar with the low kiosks along the drive, some of them are identified along there. And then I think there's some that their demise predated the existence of the park. And so
Yes.
I think those records are the hardest ones to find,
Right.
but definitely.
And predated photography, so you don't
Sure.
have to, right.
So, but maybe with time travel.
There you go.
But yes, we definitely would be interested in kind of identifying more of those places. Yes.
I remember being they're not from Park.
So that,
The question is if Alex would share more about the Fairmount Park guards who used to be in the park on horseback.
so yes, they were actually the 92nd Police District was their formal designation, and they operated out of Wissahickon Hall, at the base of Gypsy Lane and intersection of Lincoln Drive. Until the mid-90s, they ran out of funding. I don't know though, either when they started. I know they go way back, certainly by 1900, if not earlier. But I don't know when they necessarily moved there. But yes, the city phased them out, I believe around 95 or so.
I'm just gonna say to our friends on Zoom, I see a few people have your hands up, and if you really have a question, you should find in the chat, there's a link to the form that then I will be able to see your question. There's too many for me to go through the computer, so thank you. All right, yes.
There's some walls on Forbidden Drive kind of off to the side.
Mhm.
What are those, like the stone kind of walls?
I'm not sure which one. Oh, by the way.
I know. So the question is about these stone walls that are along the drive. And they predate even the construction of the very wide width of Forbidden Drive. And they're part of just old water infrastructure and stabilizing as they, to push the hillside back.
I'm curious, where are you thinking, more specifically, like Forbidden Drive?
There's a few.
Yeah, like.
I'm just curious.
Between here and kind of Kitchen Lane.
Oh, okay. Mhm.
Yeah, and
Right.
they're all around that, kind of on the
Mhm.
hillside. of
Yeah,
the drive,
and-
yeah.
They're
Right.
kind of like holding back
Yeah.
a lot of big tree
Yeah.
roots,
Mostly
and
retaining
sometimes there's
walls.
some water infrastructure
Mhm.
that flows underneath them.
Right.
What I find is amazing is all in masonry. That where are you ever going to see this again? It's like, who does that anymore?
We're all amazed by the masonry with the Wissahickon
Right.
chests.
I'm just wondering, it's a part of my imagination, but I remember 20 or 30 years ago, there was a bridge across the Crushing Creek, close to where Devil's,
Yes.
Pool is. I was told it was a plastic bridge constructed by University
Yeah,
of Pennsylvania.
And students.
Remember, right? It, I think 30 years ago,
Mhm.
it only lasted a year or two. And they said it was they tried to see if you could have a large plastic bridge like that or whatever. Largest plastic bridge. Is that my imagination or did that actually exist? Yeah.
So the question is about a bridge that used to exist over Crushing Creek, close to Devil's Pool, not the old wooden kind of Adirondack style ones that were taken out in the 70s. So there was a bridge there that I know came out, I think was around 2003 or 4. One of the storms wiped it out.
There was that one, but there was a fleeting one.
So
I
then,
mean,
so this is,
Yeah,
so
no,
then,
this is absolutely accurate.
okay, and so the recollection is of a plastic bridge installed by University of Pennsylvania students, and it lasted for 1 year, and Alex knows all about it, he's gonna tell us about it.
I know of its existence. Maybe all about it's, a little too, but hey, I'll take it. So, yes, I believe it was either Penn students or Temple students, but it was installed, I believe, around 1992 and lasted a year or so, if that. So can I do a shameless plug?
Sure.
So on the website of the Chestnut Hill Conservancy, we have over 50,000 photographs available online. So you can search with just doing a keyword search. That's going to be a little difficult, that topic, because I don't know what the sort of the way in is in terms of searching for it. But I know for a fact we have photos of not only that bridge being installed, but we have photos of the model of it. You can imagine there's a model. Yeah. Yeah. Excellent. Proceeding it. I don't remember. Yeah. Okay.
David Bauer might know the exact answer. David Bauer is in the back. Did you build this plastic bridge? No. David Bauer took the plastic bridge out. Yeah.
Remember there was a low footbridge that went right across the water.
Mhm.
That one was destroyed in Hurricane Floyd in 1999.
Yes.
And the one up above that was removed a few years later because it was being vandalized. I remember that's the first place I ever met former President Toby Rabinas, who would go out there and remove graffiti from that on his own. but that whole area, people were jumping off the bridge and they thought that, okay, let's take this one out too for a safety hazard.
Attractive
And
nuisance.
that was 10 students, and they were under the direction of former president, of the Friends of Wissahickon, David Pope. They were some heads.
Oh, okay.
Post
There you
was on
go.
it.
Much better than I was able to do.
All right, so friends who've been patiently listening on Zoom and not hearing anything, David Bauer recalls that bridge coming out and you know, Hurricane
Hurricane
Floyd,
Floyd, yep.
99.
9 September.
That's the year I graduated from college, so. Yes,
We live over in Roxborough on Rock Rector and Manioc.
Mhm.
And built 1920, any of the timber that was clear cut through here used in construction of residential properties in that area?
Oh, so the question was, I'll full on go for it. Thank you. So the gentleman asked about the use of timber from the Wissahickon Valley and the construction of houses in Roxborough and Manioc, let's just say in the 20s. The answer is that late, I tend to doubt it, but earlier on, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Let's just say well into the mid-19th century, I would not be surprised at all. But by the early 20th century, I would say probably not. Yep, I don't know that, but.
so I'm going to take a few questions because our Zoom folks have been so patient and I have about 6 questions here. And then if we still have time, maybe we'll do a few more from the room. And
Sounds good.
all right. Okay. So the first one, Alex, was there really a vineyard below the end of Gate Street downstream of Gorgas?
The answer is yes. Yeah, there was a vineyard. You can see these almost like ledges and with like retaining walls or steps, and the drop from one ledge to the next is, I'm going to say, about my height. And they are behind, I forget what the ball field's called. But yes, this is off of Henry Avenue. That is indeed a remain or ruin of a vineyard, I think, but I frankly forget if it was the Gorgas family. And we're talking mid-19th century.
Right. So our next question is, what was being manufactured at the mills?
Mostly textiles. Here's one that we kind of forget that it's actually in some ways in the Wissahickon watershed. As an example, there is the Glen Echo carpet mill, and that actually stood at present day Lincoln Drive and Carpenter Lane, Sedgwick. There's actually a fairly decent valley there. That lasted quite late until 1886, and then it moved down to Wayne Junction. So that's an example of one that I think people forget, but a carpet mill, paper mills, I mentioned earlier, there are some sawmills, Colony Castle, Griffin, was that a sawmill? And okay. So that's now the home of the Philadelphia Canoe Club.
And it was a corn mill and a sawmill.
And yes, a corn mill. Thank you for echoing that. Because I didn't. No, shame on me. And textile, grist mills, again, corn. I think those are the main products.
So I'll give this to you first, and if you
Yeah.
can't, then I'll ask you. Okay. So what is below the manhole covers we see near the creek?
There is a sewer line. I mentioned it earlier. It's called the gravity sewer, and I'm assuming, there are several sewer lines, as you can imagine, crisscrossing through the valley. But if you're talking about those that are even under or adjacent to Forbidden Drive, I believe that's part of the gravity sewer that I had mentioned earlier in the slideshow. You had that bridge over Devil's Pool, for example, would have been a part of that. So that is indeed one of a series of sewer lines. I believe they're brick lined or at least they were built that way originally in the 1890s. I know that the one at Forbidden Drive has been redone. There was a major project some years ago. So I think they're lined with some sort of rubber membrane because you can imagine over the last 100 years, the brick was starting to fail. So more or less that.
Yes. There's also some water lines as well that go
Right.
through. And the water department is regularly relining the sewer line. My understanding is with gunite, which is like a
Yes,
sprayable.
thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
I knew there was a technical term for that.
Okay. All right. Who built the walls and steps along the trails in the Kitchen Lane area?
That I am not sure of. We started to touch on the walls earlier.
Yeah, those walls.
The-
FOW built
Yeah,
some
an
steps at
FOW.
Kitchens Lane
Mhm.
in
Yeah, when was
around
that?
2011 and 12. There
I was thinking just over 10 years ago, so
Yeah.
that works. Also the Works Progress Administration that I discussed earlier, there were some stabilization projects involving their stone walls, their installation of stone walls. Unfortunately, I don't know what the trademark of those is to identify them as, aha, you know, Works Progress Administration versus any other entity. I don't know, but they are another possibility. But I can't say for 100% certainty.
And then our last one from Zoom, and then I see there's still a few more in the room, so we'll try to put those in as well. Did the chestnut blight have a devastating effect on the tree population in the Wissahickon?
So I'm going to say I assume it did, but I don't really know what the sort of percentage of chestnut trees were to anything else, any other trees in the Wissahickon Valley. But if you think about Chestnut Hill, it's called Chestnut Hill for a reason. There is no reason to assume that it didn't have a very serious consequence for the Wissahickon Valley. And that was in the early part of the 20th century. And as an aside, just so all of you know and everyone on Zoom, there are these fantastic sets of historic aerials. They're from one's from 1928 and one's from 1930. And you do see in the aerials these odd sort of clearings that don't seem to make sense. And I do wonder if some of those have something to do with the chestnut blight. You know, if you have all the trees dying, then of course there's nothing there, at least in the short term, to replace them. And just so you know, you can see the these aerials on it's called phillyhistory.org. And there are two, again, 1928 and 30 that are particularly useful.
All right. Any final questions from the room over here?
I know, yeah, you find a lot of industrial grade garnet in the valley. I just saw a recent picture of a large piece of tourmaline. That's the way found here, black tourmaline. Was there ever a commercial
Like a mining production or
for like industrial grade garnet? Or
I'm going to say not that I know of. I have never actually heard of that. Have you ever heard of? Yeah. Oh, yes. I didn't repeat the question. So this gentleman just asked if there are any formal sort of industrial mining of garnet in the Wissahickon Valley. Yeah, it does occur naturally here. And my answer to that is not that I am aware of. I've never heard of that.
I haven't
Yeah.
heard of it either, and I'm looking at David Bauer. And
Yes.
and he's slightly shaking his head no.
Okay,
So-
thanks for confirming.
Not really high quality.
No.
It really doesn't have much value, and it's usually in small pieces, deeply embedded in other rocks, and it's very hard to separate it, so I've never heard of anything like that.
So a gentleman in the back said that he's not aware of any either. He certainly has longevity in terms of his involvement and knowledge of the Wissahickon Valley. And his reasoning behind that is that the garnet in the Wissahickon Valley isn't really of high quality and not really useful. So therefore, it's not something that would really be appropriate to mine, at least not, you know, in any organized way.
Isn't there a lead mine in the valley? You know, as you go down, they have like a plaque or something
said that it's sort of a cave where Gorgas Creek.
There,
Gorgas Creek enters the Wissahickon. There's a little crack.
Yeah.
There was a lead mine there.
so we just received a question about a potential lead mine down along Gorgas Lane
Very
off of
old,
Forbidden
a very
Drive.
old
Yes, a
one.
very old, right. Yeah, this is not right. This is not exactly. Thank you for that. So, right, we're talking 19th century here. And there was something called the Roxborough Mining Company. The problem is I don't remember if that was actually lead, but yes, if you went up Gorgas Lane towards Henry Avenue, on the right is where that mine was, and I'm not sure when it was sealed off, but it is no longer there for all intents and purposes. But yeah, I just don't remember if that was actually lead, but yes, Roxborough Mining Company is correct.
Yes.
All the way up in, the Andorra Natural Area in the meadow. I've talked to hikers that are probably in their sixties and remember like buying corn from somebody out there, so like they remember it being a cornfield. And the Black Farm ruins, there's like no information that I've been able to find on it. But it was called out from the tenant farmers. Do you have any information on the Black Farm?
That is not, I've certainly heard of it, but that's not in my head. We're being asked about the Black Farm up around in Andorra Meadows. I've heard of it, but it's not in my head in terms of the history of it. But definitely, I'll give you my contact information if you didn't get it, and then we can, maybe figure it out. How's that?
Yeah.
Sure.
All right. I'm gonna thank Alex, encourage all of you to join me in thanking him. And Alex, this was great. We do history talks every once in a while. Some things we hear again, but you had a lot of new gems tonight. So I really appreciate you being here with us. And thank you all for coming out and enjoying our hopefully enjoyable and still amusing show. So have a good evening. Thank you. Thank you, Zoom. We'll say goodnight to you. All righty.